So what made you decide to like venture forth into the self-publishing world?
Well, the traditional publishing world it's great for certain projects. If I'm writing a Star Wars book or a Dune book, you want that to be blasted out into bookstores everywhere. But I write a lot of stuff and I have a bunch of different ideas, and many of my projects are sort of passion projects or something that I really want to do, or I can see the audience for it, that frankly, sort of the one size fits all traditional publishing people don't necessarily understand. And I have a really close connection with my fans. For the longest time, I had a huge following even on MySpace way back when. And I've always gone to conventions and Comic Cons and writers workshops, and I know my fan base and I know what they want. And I can publish books and deliver to my audience in ways that the big publishers can't. And also, there are times we sort of butted heads where I go, well, but this is a great idea, and they don't see it. And so then I publish it to huge success, and I go neener, neener. But no, I don't. That we'll talk about some of these examples, because I've either resurrected some of my favorite series that kind of fizzled in the big traditional publishing, or I just did projects that I knew that they wouldn't do for me. But the other thing is, way back in the early days of indie publishing, our Wordfire Press, I think we've been publishing books since 2009. So we were kind of right when the Kindle came out. We were some of the very first people that brought out our own ebooks and went into KDP and stuff. And I, as a trad author, I had written a bunch of books, and in the old days, what happened is they'd publish your book in paperback, and it would stick around for a year or so, and then it would go out of print, and nobody could ever read it again unless you found it in a used bookstore. Well, I ended up having a whole bunch of books that were out of print, and I had fans who wanted to read them. And if they just picked up battered old paperback copies in a used bookstore, well, I don't make any money from that. And I had another friend who sort of convinced me, well, Kevin, you got all these rights back, and here's your first novel, and here's your second one. And I was kind of skeptical, because in the early days, publishers have been talking about ebooks as the next big thing since like the 70s, and it never happened. And we were like, yeah, just kind of like video phones, that's never going to happen. You know, some of your young audiences might not realize this, but we were being told that video phones were going to be the thing since 1960s. And it never happened until like Skype shows up, and then now we're doing it. And I don't like to talk on a audio phone anymore. I like to see who I'm talking to. But another friend of mine, writer friend, who was a big advocate of indie publishing, and well, it wasn't even called indie publishing, they're just ebooks. He convinced me to put up a couple of my old backlist titles as just Amazon Kindle ebooks. And this was the early days. This was like Gold Rush days, and like, everybody had a Kindle and there were no books to put on it. And so I just put up these books, didn't advertise them, didn't do anything with it. And like, holy cow, in a year I made as much money as I ever made with the trad publishers. I went, there might be something here.
Maybe something's in this.
Yeah, and then we kind of branched out, because once we figured out how to do it, but this was still new. Most people didn't do it then. And I had a lot of my old traditional science fiction authors who, like Brian Herbert and the Frank Herbert estate, they were like, well, we would love to have ebooks of our old novels, but we don't want to figure out how to do it. So Kevin, why don't you do it? And then we'll split the money. And so we just kind of stumbled into it and started publishing like crazy. And my Wordfire Press now, we're up to like 400 and some titles that we've released, and 100 and some different authors. We sort of went crazy. We just grabbed everything we could and started publishing everything. Back in the days when you believed in the long tail, like if you put up 1 million titles, they each earn $1, you make $1 million. Well, it didn't always work that way. So it ended up, we spent tons and tons of time and effort on books that only sold 10 copies. And we've kind of streamlined. And what I've decided is that Wordfire Press, I write so much stuff myself now that we're kind of focusing on just Kevin Anderson projects, because I have a lot of them, and I want to spend a lot of my time and effort on things that I'll be grumpy here for a second. You would get these authors and you would you would publish their books, and they would never even so much as make a Facebook posting to promote it. And it just kind of got exhausting. And I went, well, if I'm going to put in all this effort, I might as well do it on my own stuff.
And it does take, it's a lot of effort, right? Even if you didn't write no matter who wrote the book, getting the book out there into the world and more importantly, getting people to want to read it does require a lot of effort. So if you're going to put that effort in, you would rather it be the projects that you care about the most.
Well, and, even just bare bones minimum, if you get the file and you clean it up and you convert it and you make a cover with stock art and you upload it or pay somebody to upload it. I mean, even bare minimum, you're still spending hundreds of dollars to get a book up there. And if it only makes a couple dollars a year or $10 a year, that doesn't pay your investment back. But the real, I know we're getting off into the weeds here, but the real kind of watershed moment for us was when we realized that you have to issue a 1099 to anyone that you pay more than $10 in royalties to. Not people think of 1099s as, well, if it's not $600, they don't have to issue it. No, with royalties, it's $10. And if you have to issue a 1099 for somebody that made $10 and you have to pay your accountant $15 for each 1099 you send out, well, that math doesn't work out. So we kind of did a purge of a bunch of our authors that weren't earning very much. Not so that, I mean, I would rather just leave them sit there and earn a few bucks a year. But if I have to pay to send out a 1099 and I lose money on each one of these titles, it's just not great.
So I know, like on wordfirepress.com, you guys are selling direct, and you've had that up for years now. What I know, even in the beginning, that you do a lot of signed copies, right? So I know I've purchased signed copies of several of your series from the website. So what tends to be the primary mover on WordFire Press? Is it the signed copies? Is it paperbacks and hardbacks? Is it special edition type stuff? Or do you guys do a lot of your ebook sales there as well?
Well, I mean, overall, WordFire Press, most of our stuff is ebook sales. But in fact, we can do even more work on it, that we've set up our own Shopify store on the WordFire Press site. We want people, if you want to buy a Frank Herbert trade paperback, I'd rather you bought it from us than from Amazon. And the thing is that most of our audience, if you just point out the fact that, why don't you buy direct from the publisher instead of from Jeff Bezos, everybody will go, oh, I never thought of that. And that's just an educational thing for most of our readers, to let them know that we have direct sales, and we have set up now, we have a bunch of audiobooks, so you can get the audiobooks direct from us. And in fact, that was a big driver that we've now converted. Most of our stuff is on Findaway Voices instead of ACX exclusive, because I want to sell it myself. And but me from a lot of these different appearances, Damon. Kevin, do a lot of comic cons and writers conventions and science fiction conventions, and I will set up a table and I'll bring my books there, and I hand sell a lot of books to people that want me to autograph it and give them a copy. That's sort of a niche that I've developed for myself, that they come and buy the Star Wars books, but then I'll sell them a Dan Shamble Zombie PI book. It's a lot of in-person interaction. And in fact, just last night, I did a talk at a university, and I think we sold $1,000 worth of books in an hour. I mean, that personal interaction is great. Not all authors can do that. The dead ones especially have difficulty doing that. And we publish a lot of classic books by other authors. But that is a thing that I know other publishers, because ebook sales are so predominant, they focus on or even bother with print books because they're so. But I'm kind of old school. I still like to have I want to have a pretty copy on my shelf and look at it and stuff.
Yeah. And so, because I think that's a testament to how you've managed to maintain a career, right? You're still publishing, you're still out there writing, building that fan base. And that, to me, that is what hand selling is about. It's not really about the $1,000 you made an hour, although that's not a bad deal either, right? It's nice to go home with a little scratch in your pocket, but it is more about the people that you meet in person. They're not only just buying books, there's a really good chance they're actually going to go home and read those books because, oh, I met that guy. He seemed really cool. I'm going to read his book and see what it's like, right?
Well, and they become fans and buy the next book, or they'll go out and search for your other things. And especially if you're an indie author, that is such gold, because gone are the days where, they're the huge famous authors that, I mean, everybody knew Dean Koontz. Everybody, well, they still do. Everybody knows John Grisham. Everybody knows Danielle Steele. But we all know in the indie author space, there are people making a mint with their indie books and nobody knows their name. You ask somebody, I mean, we know these people at Author Nation, at Superstars, that they're making a great living, but they're kind of invisible because they've got, either people don't pay attention to the author name because they're on KU and they just get the next Dragon book or something like that. Or they have their cluster of fans that follow everything that they're doing, or they buy the next book in the series and everything. But you go down to the person at the laundromat reading a paperback book, they've never heard of them. And, that's a whole different thing. We've broken up into a whole bunch of different smaller subcategories, which they're very successful because we're precision targeted thanks to keywords and everything. That if you like to write a steampunk vampire romance detective series, you can do that and be successful with it because you can find readers that like steampunk vampire romance detectives. But when I started out, when my first books were publishing, you bought your books in the Barnes and Noble, and they had a science fiction and fantasy aisle, and that's the narrowest category it defined anything to.
Yeah, one aisle, by the way. It was like, that was it.
One aisle, and it was like everything from all aspects of science fiction and fantasy. So you couldn't micro-target the readers who wanted your specific kind of book. And because my interests were kind of all over the place with fantasy and science fiction and steampunk and stuff, they had trouble categorizing you. And if you didn't fit into their very easy pigeonhole, they didn't quite know how to promote it because the spine of the book only said science fiction or it only said fantasy. And it's really cool that we can now find our exact audience. And I first discovered this with like Amazon Music. And I'm listening to things on Amazon Music. And very specifically, I liked Evanescence. Amy Lee is kind of like heavy metal, female vocalist. And she had like 2 albums out, and I listened to them a bunch. But let's just say Evanescence isn't the most prolific group ever. It's like one album every 5 or 6 years. And I was playing this, and I just went, wow, I wish I heard more of this. And Amazon said, hey, have you heard of Within Temptation? And I went, okay, I clicked it and I played it. And I liked that. And then it led me down this rabbit hole to the next one and the next one. And turns out I'm a big fan of Northern European goth chick metal. And
which seems very specific, but that's what you fell into, right?
So there you go.
Well, and then by building those audiences, right, by building, as I was saying, like a sustainable career is in building that audience who is going to follow you. When sure, I fell in love with you because I read your science fiction, but I like fantasy too, and you're over here writing fantasy, and that seems really cool. I'm going to go check that out, which of course leads to...
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.